Howdy folks, Deacon Parsons here. This is part 3 of the series, Real Traditional Relationships, Damsels, White Knights, and Industrialization. In this video, I plan to show how traditional relationships, as I defined it in the first 2 videos, morphed into a pseudo-traditional relationship. I'm going to explain a little bit about why and how that happened, and I'm going to redefine that as an iconic relationship. Why is it important to define the difference? Because gynocentrism is a new thing to the 99%. It's not a traditional thing. In fact, feminists and damsels are 2 sides of the same post-industrial coin. I believe that what many people today consider the traditional relationship model is actually a traditional fairy tale relationship model that draws its beginnings from the concepts of courtly love in the Middle Ages. Quoting from Wikipedia, courtly love, or fine amour, is a medieval European literary concept of love that emphasizes nobility and chivalry. Medieval literature is filled with examples of knights setting out on adventures and performing various services for ladies because of their courtly love. This kind of love was originally a literary fiction created for the entertainment of the nobility. But as time passed, these ideas about love changed and attracted a larger audience. In the High Middle Ages, a game of love gathered around these ideas as a set of social practices. Loving nobly was considered to be an enriching and improving practice. Courtly love began in the ducal and princely courts of Aquitaine, Provence, Champagne, ducal Burgundy, and the Norman kingdom of Sicily at the end of the 11th century. In essence, courtly love was an experience between erotic desire and spiritual attainment. That now seems kind of contradictory. It was a love at once illicit and morally elevating, passionate and disciplined, humiliating and exalting, human and transcendent. Close quotes. Courtly love was only practiced in court by courtiers and not the majority of the population. That, by definition, makes it non-traditional. Like King Tut's tomb, it might have been what everybody wanted, but it isn't what most people got or did. We discussed the traditional family in the first 2 videos. Suffice it to reiterate here that the amount of work necessary just to survive from the Middle Ages up to and including pre-industrialized nations precluded the pillow princess, damsel in distress wife, and the white knight husband scenario for the 99%. The entire idea of courtly love developed as entertainment for the top 1% of idle wealthy. And I want to emphasize the idle part. It began as a leisure activity to fill leisure time. Now we'll circle back around to that here in a few minutes. The stories about courtly love were the soap operas or the romance novels of their day. Now from Damocles to Mel Brooks, the concept of "it's good to be the king" has always been believed to be true. Just like today, where many people dream about winning the big lottery. Millions of people, some of whom realize that lottery is simply a tax on people that can't do math, buy tickets anyway. But being the traditional iconic dream of a society does not make it the traditional society norm. So why did the medieval aristocracy take a literary fiction and build it into their real lives? Well, it's fairly simple. Because idle wealth is very unfulfilling, soul-crushing, and they needed some external validation of their existence. We need only look at the legions of Paris Hiltons to illustrate this point. To an extent, all of us in a post-industrial society have a need for external validation that wasn't present in pre-industrial times. Think about it. When a pre-industrialized farmer comes in from a workday, his worth, his value is objective. I plowed and planted X amount of acres today. I built a barn today. I fed the cattle and the hogs today. We will have grain and meat to sell. What he accomplished is self-evident. It is there for everyone to see, and is of undeniable value. His family critically needs him. The same with a pre-industrialized homemaker. At the end of the day, she can look at the meals she provided and prepared. She can look at the clothing her family wears and say, my family has the necessities of life that I provide with my own two hands. Again, her accomplishments are objective, self-evident, and undeniably valuable. Her family, without a doubt, critically needs her. Neither partner has leached off the work of the other. Each has contributed substantially to the other's benefit. Now, the idle rich have no objective self-worth. They make no solid, tangible stuff that they can point to and say, I created this. Their value in the world and to themselves is very subjective. Since they cannot point to objective proof of their own value, they must have validation from someone else. If the damsel in distress is worth rescuing, she has value. If the white knight is successful in rescuing her, he has value. Not being producers of any tangible thing, their worth as human beings is not self-evident, but subject to the notice and approval of others. So how did iconic become confused with traditional? Pre-industrialization, the manual labor of both men's and women's lives produced a synergy and an objective self-worth based on the tangible, real-time results of their labor. This helped draw and hold their relationships together. Men and women needed each other to thrive and to succeed. Each contributed vital and substantial talent and labor resources to the whole. Separate and apart from any emotional considerations, each was better off as a part of a whole than as an individual alone. There's an old adage that says a man may work from sun to sun, but a woman's work is never done. Well, post-industrialization, women not only could get done, but they did get done. Men no longer worked from sun to sun, but put in an 8-hour day. With full industrialization, virtually everybody had something new in their lives, something that previously only the top 1% had had, and that is leisure time. The boredom of being ersatz lottery winners not only allowed people to indulge their fantasies, with the loss of objective self-value, it required them to do so. It didn't happen right away. It took 2 to 3 generations for the malaise of the empty time and loss of objective self-worth to really set in. I will fully illustrate this in part 4. As industrialization made cheap food and clothing production available to the masses, the hourly work requirement for nearly every homemaker dropped from all day to just a few hours a day to take care of her traditional duties. The same thing happened to men. They went from working sun up to sundown with tangible results to an 8-hour workday in a rat race. And remember, even if you win a rat race, you're still a rat. The average homemaker went from a producer of food to a consumer of store-bought foods. She went from a producer of clothes to a consumer of store-bought clothes. Instead of spending hours a day producing the necessities of life, she spent minutes a day purchasing them. With industrialization, our value and self-esteem went from objective to subjective. The homemaker lost her objective value and was reduced to a sex object. The same thing happened to husbands who were reduced to a commuting paycheck. In a real traditional marriage, the man and the woman were first and foremost business partners, each working hard for the business. And again, this is where the legal justification for the wife taking half of the assets in a divorce comes from. With work no longer meaning manual labor, men and women no longer really needed each other for economic reasons. What each gender traditionally brought to the relationship could now be purchased with wages that anyone could earn. There's much less personal fulfillment in saying, my family is wearing the clothing I purchased, and if I didn't buy it for them, someone else could have, than saying, my family's wearing the clothing I created with my own hands. Industrialization created shopping. first as a replacement for production, and then as people became more affluent, a hardcore and sometimes contact leisure sport. Can you say consumer economy? Industrialization made major changes in the length of childhood and childcare. Before industrialization, childhood ended at about 12 to 14 years old, and both parents were pretty much home for every meal for the kids' whole life. The kids spent most of their day watching their parents, even if the kids were lucky enough to go to school. After industrialization, childhood extended to between 18 and 24, and when Dad went to work, he was out of the picture most of the day. His influence on the children was greatly diminished. For a common literary reference, see Mr. Banks, the father, in Mary Poppins. Girl Writes What, Karen Strawn, hypothesized that the wealth of first-wave feminists allowed them the free time and the resources to create the hydra that we know as feminism. I agree with her. See Mrs. Banks, the mother in the movie Mary Poppins, for another common literary reference. I submit that what first-wave feminists protested against wasn't really centuries of male oppression, but the growing pains of a society undergoing a fundamental paradigm shift from agrarian to an industrialized society. To see another common literary illustration of the angst of the changing times brought to family dynamics, see Fiddler on the Roof. I submit that as industrialization freed up the average homemaker's time, those people who did not want to tread the suffragette path of man-hating instead did the same thing that the 1% idle rich did in the Middle Ages and latched on to courtly love model to bring subjective value to their lives. Again, can you say soap opera? I submit that after full industrialization was achieved around or shortly after the end of World War II, the relative wealth and leisure time of the average housewife from the 1950s onward created the twin succubi of second-wave feminism on the one side of the gynocentric coin and pillow princesses masquerading as traditional wives on the other. And, just as the nobles in the Middle Ages tried to bring the fairy tales to life to fill their lives which were empty of objective accomplishments, so post-industrial people did the same thing under the mistaken impression that it was traditional to do so. I will use my personal family history in the fourth installment of this series to show how and why industrialization has not been recognized as a catalyst for feminism and the destruction of the family by anyone other than the Amish. We're going to end part 3 right here. Stay tuned for part 4 soon. Until then, remember to love your maker, love your mate, and do what's right because it's right, and devil take the hindmost.